I have a question. What is up, everybody? My name is Andrew. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a little while since I've posted a video, and I have a few videos that I'm working on, and I'm trying to learn to use new software, and things are not going well at the moment, so I'm kind of set behind in my latest video projects. But anyway, here's a video, kind of a pointless video, very random, but I am posting it anyway because I do genuinely have something that is bugging me. Hey everybody, Andrew from the future here. During the editing process, I'm just like realizing how many mistakes I made in this video. I'm not even centered in the camera, and my lighting is kind of terrible, so really sorry about that. This is probably one of the lowest effort videos I've ever made, but anyway, thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. So, as per the title of the video, you may be thinking that I'm asking about whether the Elgar Cello Concerto can be played on the viola or not. That's not what I'm asking, because that's a no-brainer, right? The Elgar Cello Concerto can totally be played on the viola, and it sounds amazing. That being said, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would disagree with me on that and various controversy, but hey, what are us violists supposed to do when there's a piece of music that amazing as the Elgar Cello Concerto, and we play an instrument that's not that different? Nothing's gonna stop us from playing it, so sorry. So, in the Elgar Cello Concerto, which the Elgar Cello Concerto is probably one of my favorite pieces of all time, and it's kind of unusual because I find myself falling in love with pieces that are written for instruments that I play because I listen to music that I like, or decide that I like music because I can envision myself performing it. But the Elgar Cello Concerto is written for an instrument that I don't play, but yet I absolutely love the piece, and it's one of my favorites. But it's no surprise that I want to play it. I want to figure out some way to play it. I've got to play it somehow. It's got such an incredible musical story that, it's the sort of thing I almost feel it's so silly, but I feel like this jealousy of, like, when somebody is on stage playing a really awesome piece of music, I'm like jealous that that person is getting to tell the story. It's like, no, I want to be the one up there telling the story. It's so stupid. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about the Elgar Cello Concerto, and I just absolutely love it, and I want to perform it. I want to tell that great musical story, and the viola is by far the closest instrument that I play to the cello, the original instrument that it is for, and it's not very surprising since the viola doesn't have the greatest selection of repertoire in the world. It's not particularly surprising that the Elgar Cello Concerto, there are versions of it that exist for viola. Probably the most common version, or most popular version, would be the Lionel Tertis version. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be, because, Lionel Tertis is arguably probably one of the most legendary violists of all time, You most commonly find performances of his version of the piece whenever it's performed on viola. But there is one particular phrase, it's a dilemma, right? Trying to play the Elgar Cello Concerto on the viola, there are certain things that work and certain things that don't work what we're up against, because I mean, you would think it's super simple, right? Because the viola is an octave higher than the cello, and it's tuned the same, just an octave up. So, and the viola is even a smaller instrument than the cello and easier to manage. So, why can't you just play everything exactly in its equivalent place? Play the whole concerto an octave up, just exactly how it would equivalently fit onto the viola. But very often it just doesn't work to do that, because somehow the way that the cello responds in certain registers and the way that the viola responds in its corresponding registers just doesn't have the same musical effect and doesn't behave nearly the same at all, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense to play those parts in the corresponding octave. So it's very common that we see, a lot of cello pieces that have been transcribed for viola. There are some parts that are up an octave, but then there are quite a few parts that are actually, as written, they're in unison with the original cello part. So we're correspondingly playing them an octave down, but it's the same because the viola is an octave higher. Yeah, I probably could have explained that in a much less confusing way. But there's something about the high register of the cello in particular. Well, the high register and the low register, I would think, arguably, you could say that the cello is the stringed instrument with the highest range of any of the instruments. It very well could be. I suppose the violin is sort of competing, but with the viola, we don't see nearly so wide of a range written for the viola as we do for either the violin or the cello, which is quite interesting, and I've always wondered why this is. There's a particular lick in the Elgar Cello Concerto in the first movement at, well, actually it's towards the beginning, like at the end of the exposition, I guess, and it also comes back at the very end of the whole piece where it kind of recaps the first movement. And it's just it's just this run that goes way up to a high E, and it's so dramatic and it's so powerful, and I feel like it's one of the most musically important bits of the entire piece. Now, one thing that makes that run so great and so just, it transports you to a different dimension. You feel such a strong emotion when that part is played, and I feel like some very important elements of it that make it so dramatic and make it so powerful are where it is on the instrument. On the cello, it goes all the way up to a high E above the staff in treble clef. We're in violin territory there with how high it goes. And part of, a great performance, what makes it sound so amazing is when you hear a player who has incredible technical prowess and is able to kind of make it sound easy, per se. And, it doesn't sound like they're struggling to play, but in a way it almost sounds like the instrument itself is struggling to play. It's struggling to keep up with the player, putting such an incredible demand on the instrument, as if the instrument, the voice of the instrument itself, is struggling to produce those high notes because they're just so high. And what adds to the drama is seeing that the cello also is capable of playing incredibly low notes as well, far lower than I could ever sing. And, I have a somewhat of a low voice, but I can't sing nearly as low as the cello can play. And so there's a contrast of register there, with the cello having comfortable access to an incredibly low register, contrasted with that super high part that makes it even more dramatic. It kind of really soars out of the texture of the music and jumps right at you, and it makes it so powerful. Now, when that lick, when that run is played on the viola, in the viola versions of the Elgar Cello Concerto, usually in pretty much every version that I've heard so far, maybe there are some of you watching this who've heard versions that I haven't heard and maybe they do something different, but in all the versions that I've heard so far, it only goes, that is one of those sections that's taken down the octave, so it's played in unison with the original cello part. So we're playing it starts in a middle register for the viola, not a high register, and then it goes up to the high register. It doesn't go up to that super high register that it does for the cello. And it still sounds pretty awesome on the viola, I will say, but a lot of that drama is lost because it lacks the contrast. You know, the low register of the viola is amazing and it's incredibly rich and powerful, but it's not nearly as low, it's not nearly as deep as the low register of the cello. And so we don't have nearly as much contrast to work with to get those high notes to really soar and to really, like, you know, jump out at you and be like, wow, listen, you know, I'm really crying out to you here in this part of the story. And so, of course, my thought is, well, how can we make this more musically convincing on the viola? What would be wrong with doing something, you know, it seems like adding a technical challenge is something that would be perfect to help along that sort of pursuit of making something more musically impactful as well. You know, oftentimes they kind of go hand in hand, you know, something that is incredibly technically challenging and also great music kind of makes for some of the most powerful artistic expression on a musical instrument, because, you know, the blood, sweat, and tears that it requires to play it well adds to how great the music is. So I was like, well, why isn't anyone playing this up the octave? Why isn't anyone playing this, you know, and going all the way up to the end of the fingerboard and playing that double high E in the corresponding octave? Why aren't we doing that? So I tried it. And it was at this point, we're just gonna not pretend. We're just gonna pretend that didn't happen. So it was at this point that I realized why violists don't play this up the octave. It's just, the viola is just built different, you know. It's a more difficult instrument to play, and it just seems like you have to fight harder to get things out of it. And if you were to try and play in that corresponding register on the violin, it probably would be doable, at least mostly, but somehow getting up to the end of the fingerboard on the viola is so much more difficult because of how we hold the instrument and the size of the instrument. And, you know, I have relatively small hands, but for playing the violin, that's fine. You know, I can manage it perfectly fine. But on the viola, I run into some trouble because my hands relative to the instrument, it makes it a lot more challenging. And so there's a point when I'm going up that scale when I've run out of room here. I can't reach any further. So I kind of have to get my palm above the body of the instrument and get myself up here. And now my thumb has completely come around the neck. I'm not even under the neck anymore. I'm all the way up here, and I feel so ungrounded and so unstable, and I feel like I'm just gonna fall off of the instrument entirely. And that's the only way I can get up here, and I feel like I have no leverage at all, and no tone production either, and it's impossible to play notes in tune and have them sound good, and it's just not very fun. Now, all this having been said, I still really want to, if I ever get a chance to perform this piece as a violist at some point, I still want to play it up the octave. It's a challenge. I see it as a challenge that I want to conquer. Can I make that super high octave sound good and reap the musical and artistic reward of having really taken a risk? You know, it seems like it would be such a great thing to do, but who knows? Maybe this is a stupid idea. Maybe this is not even worth discussing. That's kind of why I made this video, to even bring it up. My hope is that violists will watch this video and get to thinking about it, and you know, if you're a violist and you've worked on the Elgar Cello Concerto, any of the versions of it, you know, and you've thought about this as well, I'd so love to hear your thoughts. I want to start a discussion. Any violists who have thoughts to chime in about this, I'd love to hear it in the comments section. So anyway, that's the end of this pointless video. Thanks for watching. I hope you're doing fantastic. You can subscribe if you'd like. This is kind of an unusual video for me, but I do lots of musical projects. I love to just perform music here on the channel because I love to share it, and you know, it makes me happy. I hope it makes you happy too. So if you want to hear some music, stick around. You know, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I promise I do have some more videos coming soon. So anyway, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll see you later. If you were to try and play in that corresponding register on the violin, it probably would be doable, at least mostly. Never mind. Is this thing on? I have a question.